womanhood and the scope of womanhood is something that Miuccia Prada captures so brilliantly. So Miu Miu is the first show that I want to talk to you about for our final Paris review. And this season, Miuccia Prada for Miu Miu AW24 womenswear was specifically looking at the idea of girlishness. I want to start by reading something from the press notes that she wrote. Girlishness is a word we can revalue from a pejorative gendered noun anchored to age to a universal idiom expressive of the strength of rebellion, a spirit of freedom and individuality, one attribute of a richer whole. That idea of wholeness, the woman is kind of one whole being but made up of many multifaceted things, to me is an obvious kind of reality of the experience of being a woman. But Miuccia, her collections always capture this multifacetedness so playfully, so intelligently and so well. You know, Miu Miu over the last few years especially has had this kind of resurgence in terms of a younger consumer, this obsession with people talking about it, reposting it online, but really influencing the way that girls and women are dressing. You think about a few seasons ago with the mini skirt, you know, even kind of the idea of layering a v-neck jumper over a bright blue shirt. How much, you know, if you just walk past Zara and high street stores, you can see the effect of that trickling down, and the influence that has had on the mass consumption of fashion. So I think talking about and thinking about a Miu Miu show at the moment, it has such impact and such an audience, and I don't think that Miuccia necessarily, there's a responsibility to what Miuccia does, and I think that she recognises that, but it also comes from such a kind of instinctual way of designing and way of dressing. She did a really interesting interview for another magazine between her and kind of Raf speaking, and she spoke about this, how her and Raf Simons, if you don't know, they're the co-creative directors at Prada, but Miuccia solely designs Miu Miu. But what I found interesting about it was she was saying that she designs very much and puts things together in terms of theory in her mind, and this collection came from that kind of theory, but that idea of kind of instinctualness. So going back to this idea of girlishness that I started with, this collection was almost the idea of a girl dressing up in her mother's wardrobe, and the gloves in this collection so oversized, almost kind of like gardening gloves, but you think about maybe a child putting their hands inside their mother's kind of driving gloves or their mother's evening gloves. In this collection it was kind of the top half of the glove had kind of lacquered leather, faux croc fabric as well, those ideas of kind of, you know, I mentioned the shrunken mini skirt from a few seasons ago. We had shrunken silhouettes in this collection, but it was, you know, maybe even a reflection of the influence that Miu Miu has had on kind of girls, quote unquote, and rethinking about that and how girlhood still lives within womanhood, and the two kind of are multifaceted and play with one another. They're not mutually exclusive. So, you know, in this collection there were kind of shrunken double buttoned jackets, kind of little skirt suits where these jackets would be shrunken, this idea of kind of trompe-l'oeil layering, so the kind of Miu Miu grey and Miu Miu blue cardigans and jackets layered over shirts, the kind of blue shirt, but then here in this collection that was actually a trompe-l'oeil effect many times. So it was actually kind of fabrics melded together to give this trompe-l'oeil effect of layering. So you'd have kind of a sweater and a shirt, but then that was done in kind of silk and cashmere, and it was all one thing and kind of sewn together. There's this playful girlishness in terms of almost kind of the very Prada shoes in this collection, the kind of pointed mix between a Mary Jane and a court shoe, but the kind of huge block heel of the Prada shoes was taken away and replaced by a small kitten heel, and the effect that had on these women was almost that idea of when a girl puts on her mother's shoes and shrinks down in them, that kind of stance it gives your body as you're sitting, you're kind of standing lower and sinking into the ground, but that wasn't to say that it gave these clothes a naive feeling, and they still had a very intelligent and confident feeling, but played perhaps with that naivety of girlish dressing. From the opening of this collection, which is these kind of 3-buttoned kind of jackets, kind of, and all clutching these bags, then you start getting the integration of these gloves, whether that's kind of elbow high or kind of just your classic glove in these increasingly bold colours. You know, this integration in this collection of kind of your neutral colours, browns, blues, greys, and then you get these infusions of kind of highlighter orange, highlighter yellow, the rib tights throughout this collection, again from grey to kind of deep purple, paired with those shoes I was mentioning, but also kind of leather Mary Janes. Key is kind of the Miu Miu styling of the different layers in this collection. Here imbues this idea of girlishness, that idea of kind of dressing up in your mother's wardrobe, still having that play once you get to womanhood. So you have the rib tights become visible, pulled out from underneath the neon highlighter green pencil skirt, and then you see the shirt tucked underneath below that. But could it also be kind of a boxer short? Faux fur is such a trend that we're seeing in nearly all the catwalks this season. Miu Miu did that in their own way, kind of almost playing to that older idea of womanhood, that kind of grandma chic almost aesthetic, but here worn by Amelia Gray, this kind of collarless waist length jacket over a faux fur coat, and then with the kind of classic Miu Miu bijou kind of brooches across the chest. The boots and the shoes in this collection, the Miu Miu kind of biker boot from last season, again we've seen that trickle down, being worn on the streets, and people buying the original Miu Miu, but then also seeing copies left, right and centre. We had further iterations of those kind of beaten leather shoes this season. Also done, there were some other great shoes as well in this collection. I really like the kind of shorter lace up boots in this collection, as well as further iterations of biker boots, leather slippers, leather kind of slip-on Miu Miu shoes, which I think I can predict will be massive. Skirts in this collection, the introduction into this collection of the one graphic print that we have, which is kind of moving through purples and greens and oranges, those kind of big graphic prints, you know, graphic prints so key for kind of Prada. I think of it more as a Prada thing in my mind, but here brought into the Miu Miu universe, and then paired with these kind of little knitted jackets and shirts, hands tucked into pockets with the gloves on. This is just a really brilliant collection because it reflects that multifaceted scope of womanhood. You know, the press notes were talking about this idea of scope of character, scope of womanhood, also this idea of memories. The show space is usually filled with some sort of artist installation, usually video. This season was video installations by the Belgian-American artist Cecile B. Evans. The show was called Reception. The film showed this idea of this kind of AI person called Reception, and these different layers of language being fed to them from someone else's, another woman's memory. So I think there's also this playful idea that perhaps of self-reflection from Miuccia, you know, she's always, you know, there's that quote that's gone viral from another interview where she said, when I wake up I have to decide whether I'm an old woman or a little girl. I'm paraphrasing there. But this collection felt so like the realization of what she was saying there, this mixture of thinking about memories of girlhood, being a girl, being a woman, being able to be both, and how you approach clothing and dress with it. You know, thinking about that idea of dressing up. There's so much joy in these clothes in terms of thinking about the way things are put together, the different kind of textures and fabrications, everything from those suede coats with the kind of sparkly flower brooches on, through to the almost Jackie O.S. kind of skirt suits with the kind of gardeners / ladies gloves that I mentioned, the faux fur, the purposefully creased silk dresses, which is kind of a trope that we see again and again played with at Prada and also at Miu Miu. Another thing I loved was these puffer jackets then layered over kind of almost more gardening jackets with the velcro visible. So this idea of kind of, and then those were paired with these graphic flower skirts, this idea of that almost when you're a girl and a child and society hasn't put any rules of dressing into your head yet, so you mix and play with lots of different things and change the context of things, you change the rules of things, you put one thing that goes with another that shouldn't necessarily. And I think really that's not necessarily a new idea for Miu Miu or Miuccia Prada to play with. That feels very much at the core of a lot of the magic of Miu Miu and Prada. And I think what I love about what Miuccia does is that she continues to reevaluate and reflect on those kind of ideas that she goes back to again and again. Casting for this collection, again, a reflection of all of these ideas, a huge range of wonderful women, you know, the singer Ethel Cain, the musician Lil Sims, models Amelia Gray, Gigi Hadid, then the actress Kristen Scott Thomas, a range of women and a scope of women, both in the casting and in the clothes, that is both refreshing and joyful to see go down the runway. So bravo to Miu Miu for Autumn Winter 24. Now I'm coming to you having just left the Louis Vuitton show, Nicolas Ghesquière's 10-year anniversary show. Wow, what a show that was, and how much it's got me thinking about some of the same things that I was actually thinking about earlier, but in a very different context. This idea of confrontations of eras, whether that's personal, purely historical, or imagined. That show felt so full of energy in terms of real, well-designed, incredibly exciting clothes from one of the greatest designers of our time. I think it's apt to be talking about Miuccia Prada and then Nicolas Ghesquière in one review. Both of these designers are masters of modern clothes, and in them we find this culture of fashion that can and does feel so dead elsewhere, and has felt so bleak elsewhere in the industry and in fashion collections. You know, having gone from speaking about Miuccia earlier and her looking at this idea of girlishness, different eras of womanhood and different eras of our own wardrobe, and then going to Nicolas, who a lot of what he does is very, very simply and naively put, is mixing different, you know, time periods together. He loves to kind of jump between time, but he's also a master of these confrontations of time himself, because he is so at the forefront and has been so kind of at this 10 years at Vuitton and before Balenciaga of predicting the future, of doing things which people may not have liked at first and then come through to trickle down. I was talking about trickling down earlier with Miu Miu, but Nicolas has really influenced and changed silhouette, the very kind of way that women dress, that we think about dress, that we think about how people can dress. You know, Nicolas has such a responsibility and an authority over fashion and clothing, and it's so exciting and such a privilege to get to see that in action, to see him at this huge fashion business that is Louis Vuitton, but still be cultivating this creation of new ideas. In November 2023, he renewed his contract with Vuitton for 5 more years. And, you know, tonight, this was my first time going to a Vuitton womenswear show. I remember that first collection by Freya Eriksson opened for Autumn Winter 14. I remember a couple of seasons later, Autumn Winter 15, look one, that shaggy white coat. It's just imprinted in my memory, because I remember then when he first came to Vuitton, they did these campaigns and this touring exhibition, and I remember that coat in this kind of glass vitrine, those early collections at Vuitton really being imprinted in my mind. So to be there tonight at what was kind of a greatest hits show felt like such a privilege and so exciting. You know, this soundtrack which was making my seat vibrate and was just such a energetic and engaging and brilliant soundtrack. Doing a great fashion show isn't just about the clothes, it's about being able to tell that whole story, and for that whole story to be able to perforate on a global basis for a brand like Louis Vuitton, to touch people on a global level. You know, and I remember watching those early Nicolas Louis Vuitton shows from my bedroom on YouTube, and they touched me, they excited me. I remember at the time Michel Gaubert, the sound director, was doing the soundtracks, and I remember one of the songs that he chose for Autumn Winter 15 was a remix of a Roy Keesop song called I Had This Thing, and ever since it's been one of my favourite songs. It's this kind of synth pop electronic song. It really wasn't kind of the thing that I was listening to at the time, or really my taste in music, but it really touched me within the context of this show and seeing Freya and these models come down the runway. And that was one of the first moments I really understood the importance of music to a fashion show, and music has always been so important to Nicolas. So, you know, it's important for me to mention how that music made me feel tonight. It kind of vibrating through the chairs, you know. I'd watched these early shows at this same venue on YouTube in my bedroom, and now I got to be there in person in this whole world, you know, this set that was conceived by the artist Philippe Perreno with a film production designer called James Chinland. It's this all-encompassing cinematic experience, and this soundtrack for Autumn 24 was this kind of retro futuristic mix of the artists Miu, Flavien Berger and Duke Dumont and Sean Ross. Go and watch this show on YouTube if you haven't already, and just listen to the music, because it's incredible, the pace, the energy to it. It's absolutely essential to what a fashion show is. And then the clothes, which, yes, were codes of Nicolas as kind of this great designer and things that he's done at Vuitton over the past 10 years, but, you know, in a similar way to Miuccia, it's being able to take codes of the past and imprint something new on them, which is something that we rarely, if ever, see anymore, especially from a lot of kind of the new generation of creative directors that we're seeing. This, you know, this show was kind of, they had kind of lights going, we were in kind of behind the Louvre where the show usually is. They had lights going across and above us. We were in this kind of big glass tent, and it was the lights and the vibration, it was as if helicopters were going above us. The set was this kind of massive sci-fi generator in the middle, speaking to these ideas of kind of futurism and time that kind of penetrate Nicolas Ghesquière's work, and that have come to kind of define lots of ideas about his kind of Vuitton reign over the last 10 years. And, you know, this collection highlights for me included the plastic fringing on the sleeves and the plastic parkas, the kind of silver disc dresses and shaggy gloves, which reminded me of that coat that Freya wore in that previous collection, golden woven skirt suits, kind of almost tartans, a take on the spring-summer 18 Ancien Regime jacket, the jacquard jacket, skirts which flounced out at the bottom underneath kind of vests and t-shirts, leather hats, the mesh bunny hats as well. This was just, I wrote in my notes, a fucking great fashion show. I felt so lucky and excited and engaged to be there, and it made me feel really excited about clothes and about fashion, and that is the magic of what Nicolas has done over the past 10 years at Vuitton. And I think we'll have to come back to you with a proper breakdown of the looks from this collection and how they reference Nicolas' past. So stay tuned for that, and thank you for joining us for our Paris Women's Wear Autumn 2024 coverage, and we will see you next time.